If I asked you who was the greatest villain in Shonen, who would you choose? Doflamingo? Pain? Aizen? Meruem? These are all great choices, and I wouldn't fault you if you thought any of these were the greatest villain in Shonen. But if we're talking about the greatest Shonen villain, to me there is only one choice. That is the younger Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho. This video will analyze not only the writing behind Toguro's character, but also the themes of the character and how it contributes to the themes of the story at large. Now, if you don't understand why I specified Toguro as not being necessarily the best villain in Shonen, but undoubtedly being the best Shonen villain, then stay tuned because by the end of the video, you'll understand exactly what I mean. First, we have to understand what exactly a villain is in the first place. Now, all villains are antagonists, but not all antagonists are villains. An antagonist is a character that opposes the protagonist or the main character, and a villain is simply an evil antagonist, meaning their views are meant to be wrong. What makes Toguro so great is that he's a complex person, yet a relatively simple character. He's written with only the traits that are needed to be a shonen villain, with no extra fluff, while still being a fully three-dimensional character. And what's great is that each dimension of his character is slowly revealed progressively throughout the story. The first dimension of a character is simply their function in the story, and of course an antagonist's role in the story is to oppose. And in shonen battle manga, it's specifically to oppose the protagonist in a fight. And in Toguro's introductory arc, this is and is all that Toguro is there for. The Yukina rescue arc features Yusuke and Kuwabara infiltrating the mansion of their wealthy Tarukane to, rescue Yukina. Yukina is being held captive by Tarukane and used to produce crystals for him, but Tarukane is not really a fighter, so he hires demons as bodyguards, with his two best being the Toguro brothers. I neglected to call Toguro a villain before because in this first introductory arc, Tarukane is the real true villain and is the one with the evil agenda, with the Toguro brothers serving as practically just weapons for him. They are so impartial that by the end of the arc, they switch sides completely and are working under a completely different villain with completely different motives that take them out of conflict with the protagonist. We do see glimpses of Toguro's personality in further depth, like when he advises Yukina to learn to produce crystals at will. This could be a hint of Toguro's sympathy, or it could just be a pragmatic solution that would help Tarukane extract jewels from her easier. Either way, Toguro is established as a mostly one-dimensional character in this first arc, and he serves as not the mastermind or any other purpose in the story, but simply a physical obstacle for Yusuke. But immediately after the last arc ended, Toguro confronts Yusuke and forces him to join the Dark Tournament, inciting one of Shonen's most iconic arcs, the Dark Tournament arc. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the Dark Tournament arc is the shonen arc. I mean, when I say shonen, you're not really thinking of it as a demographic for young boys, but as a genre of battle manga. And likely as a carryover from sports manga, the tournament arc has become the trademark arc for shonen battle manga, with the Dark Tournament being the exemplary one out of all of them. So it's no coincidence that the villain of the shonen arc of all shonen arcs is Toguro, the shonen villain of all shonen villains. In the Dark Tournament arc, Toguro isn't a pawn of a villain like Tarukane. This time he formed a more equal partnership with his team sponsor, Sakyo, where they both happen to have complementary goals. This is where we get to see the second dimension of Toguro's character, his characterization, and similarly to how he only had one simple role as a physical obstacle in the last arc, he's given only one simple personality trait, his desire for a challenging battle. Now it may seem like I'm selling Toguro short by simplifying his character to one trait, but I don't see his simplicity as a bad thing because unlike a lot of badly written tough guy characters, Toguro's simplicity is executed so well. For example, we have Jiren from the Tournament of Power, who's a similar character to Toguro and is meant to oppose the idea of trust. But while he does succeed on the first level by being a tough solo antagonist that forces the protagonist to team up, he himself is already on a team of heroes that have the same values, so he doesn't work to oppose the idea of trust. And on top of that, he has a generic backstory that doesn't add anything to the character. Now you can say that Toguro is on a team as well, but his team is not formed based on trust, it's based on purely power, which is why Team Toguro properly contrasts Team Urameshi. Now then there's characters like Kaido, who's admittedly better than Jiren, but whose characterization doesn't make much sense. He's supposed to be too strong to die and is looking for a thrilling battle, yet the established One Piece world that he inhabits is set up to be like a Cold War setup where there are several equally strong factions that are in a Mexican standoff with each other. So to compensate, Other character traits are just thrown in that end up going nowhere in the end. Toguro succeeds where these characters fail. His characterization is shown better by having his actions actually fit his goals. Toguro invites Yusuke to the Dark Tournament because he wants to test his strength, and he teams up with Sakyo, not just because of his funds, but because Sakyo's goal of opening a portal to the demon world will allow him to fight opponents that are just as strong as him, since he's the strongest in the human world by far. Toguro has one simple role in the story, which translates to one simple character trait, which translates down to one simple internal conflict. The third dimension of a character is their depth. Depth is a commonly misused word when referring to a character's writing, and is often confused with complexity. Now, a complex character often has some depth, but it doesn't mean that a character has to be complex to have a quality depth to them, Toguro being the prime example. And if we're going to take this three-dimensional analogy literally, then the first dimension of a character being their role, and extending from that is the second dimension being their characterization, then that would mean the third dimension is just an extension of their characterization, their depth. And that's what a lot of the tough guy characters miss. Just like having a lot of roles in the story or character traits doesn't necessarily make a character good, the same goes with having lots of depth. It's the quality, not the quantity, that matters. And if the character's backstory doesn't extend naturally from their characterization, then it doesn't add to the character and what the author is trying to say through them. Toguro's backstory is likewise a natural extension of his one role and one trait in the story. 50 years ago, before the start of the story, Toguro was a human and a lover of Genkai, and the two had opened a dojo together. But this was all ruined when the demon Kairen murdered all of Toguro's pupils and invited him to the Dark Tournament, where Toguro would finally defeat him in the final round. Afterwards, Toguro and his brother wished to be made into demons by the tournament committee, so that they would never be vulnerable humans again. This backstory seems pretty basic and shallow, but a character's depth isn't solely revealed through the backstory. With Toguro, the backstory merely gives us the foundation to understand his depth, and to understand the full depth of Toguro is crucial to understand his relationship with Genkai. When Toguro invited Yusuke to the Dark Tournament, there were obvious parallels to his fight against Kairen, and I think this was intentional on Toguro's part to ensure that the result of his fight with Yusuke would affirm his philosophy. If Yusuke's friends had died in the tournament, Yusuke would have been in the exact same position as Toguro once was, which means that the only way that Yusuke can obtain enough power to prevent something like that from happening again would be to take the exact same path as Toguro did. Except that when Toguro invited Yusuke to the Dark Tournament, he had no idea that his master was none other than Genkai, who was living proof that there was another path. While Toguro wished to become a demon, Genkai's wish was to never participate in the tournament again. This is the ultimate sign of acceptance and moving forward, eliminating all chances of revenge or temptation. Genkai regaining her strength and beauty for a split second after using her spirit wave before flickering away must have been torturous for Toguro to watch, knowing that she could have kept her youth forever if she had just taken his path. And on the other hand, instead of facing Yusuke to prove his strength, if Toguro had just taken Genkai's path, they could have grown old to train Yusuke together. That's why I love the fact that Toguro and Genkai's dynamic is written not as a former student and teacher, with the student simply disobeying and going down to the dark side, but as former partners that went down two completely different paths after a fork in the road. That's what the relationship of Toguro and Genkai is all about, and it's one of the best dynamics in the entire series. When I say Toguro is simplistic and only has one trait, that's misleading because it isn't the entire truth. So far I have been stressing solely how well Toguro opposes the ideas of humanity and connections, but in the later stages of the Dark Tournament arc, we start to see contradictory actions within Toguro. This is because, deep down within Toguro, there's a second philosophy, a piece of humanity that is constantly fighting with his demon side. When Genkai and Toguro meet, Toguro is the resentful one. The elderly Genkai is poised with a sense of acceptance, while Toguro is aggressively insulting her as if he has something to prove. I take this as Toguro attempting within himself to suppress that tiny fragment of humanity, of Genkai. This is also shown through his honor, when he destroys his own brother and teammate, who took the exact same path as him, just because he mocked Genkai's death, even though ultimately, Toguro is the one who actually killed her. The death of the mentor is a common and predictable trope which is used to motivate the protagonist and have them enter the unknown world on their own. But most importantly in this case, the death of the mentor leaves the mentor's will in the hands of the protagonist, which is exactly what Genkai giving her spirit orb to Yusuke was. Toguro doesn't kill Genkai because he hates her or what she represents. It's actually the opposite. She doesn't mean anything to him anymore. More accurately, she's like an empty shell. All her beauty has faded and her strength is gone. Everything that she represents and stands for now lies within Yusuke. And this all is what the conflict between Yusuke and Toguro stands on top of. Toguro initially fights Yusuke only to prove his strength and affirm that his choice to become a demon and to never be vulnerable again was the right choice. But through Genkai's spirit and guidance, Yusuke comes to learn that embracing his humanity, emotions, and connections are his power, and he defeats Toguro using literally the power of friendship. This theme is executed so well due to the great characters of Genkai and Yusuke, but especially Toguro, who serves as not only a villain, but as a mentor. Deep down, Toguro sees himself as a parental figure to Yusuke just as much as Genkai, and wants to be defeated by him in the end. After his death, we see that he kills Genkai and Kuwabara to motivate Yusuke, but he actually spares Kuwabara's life and Genkai's body for revival, and on some level, he became a demon to take responsibility for the death of his pupils, as a sort of twisted form of atonement. In the end, Toguro affirms Yusuke's power of friendship while still accepting the choice he made to become the villain. Shonen manga are characterized by its themes of courage, victory, and friendship, and while themes like that are mocked and seen as generic and boring, when they're placed on a foundation of a more philosophical conflict, like the nature between power, humanity, and mortality, it becomes a lot more meaningful. Toguro served as the perfect shonen villain in role, characterization, and depth to thematically oppose the shonen spirit, and the only person cynical enough to do that would be a man with a wounded heart and a broken dream. That is what makes the Dark Tournament the greatest shonen arc, and what makes Toguro the greatest shonen villain. That's all I have for Toguro. If you want to watch a general dissection of the Dark Tournament arc in general, or you want a dissection of Yu Yu Hakusho's other great villain, Sensui, then make sure to subscribe so you can be notified when those videos come out, if they haven't came out already. I plan on making more dissections of Yu Yu Hakusho, Hunter x Hunter, and other anime villains in general in the future. So if you have any thoughts or requests, leave them in the comments below.